Hey guys, Scott Satterlee out here in San Diego with the Tactical Hyve crew. And what we're going to do, we're doing a video about the components required to be really successful at long range. Now, again, long range is a game. It's also about applying force at distance, whether you're law enforcement, you're a hunter, you're military. All this stuff really applies to this long range game. And that's really why I started shooting long range to begin with, was I started competing with it. I was active duty military, and I figured the better I can shoot, the longer I can live. Now I'm doing it because I hunt. So I like to hunt. I like to be able to apply force at distance. And what I found in the hunting world is that sometimes the further back I get, the more ethical the kill is. Okay, what I mean by that is, 500, 600 yards, 700 yard shot is actually pretty easy if you have the right components, if you have the right equipment. And the animal doesn't know it's being hunted yet, so it's not all amped up, it's not running around, it's not overheated. Your chances of you shooting it and it just falling straight down is actually a lot higher. And I get that a lot on a lot of other forums where, oh man, that's not an ethical kill. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably more ethical than a lot of people are before they even leave the garage. The stuff that we need, okay, we need to be able to find it, and I have a couple of different things. I've got a really nice set of binos. This is kind of for spotting and finding and really glassing a lot of area. I can sit down, it's super comfortable, but I lose some detail with this that I'm gonna pick up with this, okay? Now, if I'm doing a hike and shoot, I probably won't carry this because this is about 5 pounds, but if I'm pulling everything off the back of a truck, setting down and observing, I'll definitely get this because I can gauge an animal or find targets at great distance with this. Is a Night Force. This is their super HD glass. It's made by Myopta. It's pretty neat set of kit, right? I can tell, I can tell eye color at 700 yards with that. Okay, now the other thing we need. Okay, and I'm going down on a list of priorities here. So priority 1 is being able to find it. Priority 2 is being able to see how far it is. And my scope company, my gun manufacturer, they hate me when I say this, but you have to find it, you have to fix it. Okay, so important, really, really important. If we don't know how far it is, we can't shoot it. We can guess, but then again, we're guessing, and of course now we bring in error. Okay, and this is a kind of a high-end laser. It's a Plurf 10. You don't need this, okay? What I like is what's coming out now is a good combination between binos and laser, and some of them have shooter solutions in them. The SIG product is pretty good. The GeoVids are really good. There's a bunch of products coming out now that have a solver built in, so that's one less or 2 less pieces of kit you have to carry. Anyway, so important, really, really important. And then we're going to get to the rifle and the importance of it. Okay, now, honestly, I think your scope is going to be the third most important thing, and more important than anything else in here is probably your scope. It has to do what your computer tells it. Now, we've got a couple of different choices. We've got, your Kestrel 5700. You also have your phone, and there's a ton of different apps. There's Stray Lock. There's Ford Off. Hornady Ford Off is actually a really good app. And then you have Shooter. Those are the ones I like to use because they're the easiest for the shooter to use. Okay. We still need to know what the atmospherics are, so we need to know temperature, altitude, and how thick the air is, and that's why I like having the Kestrel, so you have to have this anyway. Sometimes with some of the shooter solutions, you can draw information off the nearest airport, but you might be way higher up than the nearest airport. I think we're, 1,000 feet higher than the airport? And it might even be warmer out here. So those are some of the things that you need to consider when you start shooting really far. Now, when we start talking about a scope, again, I invest way more money and effort, and I agonize over my choices a lot more when it comes to optics than I do the rifle, okay? So, and what I look for is I like a first focal plane scope, okay? Second focal plane, what happens when you dial up and dial down, the reticle stays the same size, but the animal gets bigger or smaller, the target gets bigger and smaller. And with a first focal plane scope, the reticle and the target stay the same size. So what happens is subtensions in your scope stay the same. So it takes out one more of those human error things where I didn't know I was on 11 power, and it was, so each one of the subtensions in here is worth twice as much as what it was when it was on 22 power. Okay, so that's why I like the first focal plane scope. It's one less thing, and I do all my wind holds and all. Sometimes I'll do holdovers on targets based on the reticle. So if I'm not on the right power in a second focal plane scope, you're going to cause error. I like a good power range. So this one is a 7 to 35. Okay, it might be a little bit much for the everyday hunter. Especially in this kind of terrain here where it's pretty brushy and we're going to be hunting a little bit closer. So that's when I'd look at that, I'd look at something more like a 4 power or a 2.5 to 20, 4 to 16, something in that ballpark. Okay, but this is kind of set up for competition. It's long range competition, so it's one of those things. I like the 35 power. I hardly ever use it, but I like it because it's there. Okay, now how we mount this thing to the rifle is important. So now I've spent $4,000 on a scope, I've spent $5,000 on a rifle, and now I'm going to spend $50 on rings. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so because the scope can move around, and it will move around if you don't have good, all I got to do is tap this thing or drop it or bounce it, and your scope's going to move. You're going to get to where you're going, and you're not going to be able to hit what you're aiming at because you're not pointing where you thought you were. Okay, so that's a big deal. So good mounts. And then when we talk about rifle, okay, there's a lot of different things that we can do. I particularly like a chassis gun because I shot an AR a bunch, so this feels comfortable to me. Other folks that have done more of a traditional hunting stock their whole life, they're going to feel more comfortable with a traditional hunting stock. And and my hunting rifles are kind of a traditional, they're Manners. EH1s, there's their Elite Hunter. It's a pretty neat setup, but for competition setup or military law enforcement, I kind of like this because it allows me to do a lot of stuff. I can balance the rifle with external and internal weights. I can move the bipod back and forth. I can clip it to my tripod. I can change the geometry on the back of the rifle quite a bit. And for me, I like a very low cheek piece because I like to be able to shoot left-handed, whether it's forced or unforced. So rifle mounts, or scope mount rifle, okay? And I go with the best action I can afford, okay? And this one's a Defiance Deviant. There's also impact actions, Lone Peak, Priest Precision. There's a ton of really good actions out there. And I went with Defiance because, those guys are good friends of mine. They're a local Montana company, and they make a great action. So that's what I went with. And that's kind of the heart of your action, and you can spend as much or as little money as you want on it. But as soon as you start spending money on it and you think you're getting a good deal, I've done the Remington 700 off-the-shelf type actions, and then I had my gunsmith true them up and get them so that they run right, and they're still not as good as this, and they end up costing about the same. So in my opinion, if you're going to go with a custom gun, buy the best action you can and start from there. Okay, now barrels, of course, I shoot proof barrels. They're not the only good company out there. You have Bartline and Krieger and Brux, and there's a Citrion. There's a ton of really good barrels out there. I happen to go with these guys again because it's the guys. Greg Hamilton's a pretty good friend of mine. He's a good deal. He's treated me really good, and they make a great barrel. Okay, they also make carbon fiber barrels, which are what my hunting rifles are made out of, so you save a bunch of weight there. But as far as getting a carbon barrel for a match rifle, unless it's going to be for the Sniper Adventure Challenge or some competitions like that where you're going to be running around and you need a lighter rifle, I'd stay away from them because it's cost prohibitive. Once you start shooting competitions, you're going to go through barrels pretty fast. And when you're talking about $900 for the barrel blank and then getting it fitted, all of a sudden it gets cost prohibitive to do that. Plus the extra weight helps you out with recoil management, okay? I use a muzzle brake when I shoot competitions. Some guys like to do suppressors. And depending on the match, if I'm shooting a team match with my buddy Kevin Ditto, we will run suppressed. That way we can talk back and forth without yelling at each other. And it cuts down on dust. Okay, but what the muzzle brake does in an individual match, for me, is it stops the rifle quicker. Okay, so a suppressor is going to mitigate some of the gas blowing back, which is going to continue to move the rifle even after the bullet's gone. But what it does is it kind of delays and spreads out that recoil impulse. Okay, and what a muzzle brake does, it's designed like this, is you still get the recoil impulse of the bullet leaving the barrel, but the gas being directed back at the shooter stops the rifle. So you're able to see what's going on downrange a lot easier with a muzzle brake than you can with a can. Okay, now let me talk about chassis systems. Okay, I prefer this ACC chassis because I've got quite a bit of extra length here where I can move the bipod out further. It makes me a little bit more stable. It also allows me to span a greater distance. Okay, and I'm able to move this bipod around quite a bit, so I get a lot of flexibility in what I can do with it. Now, there's also weight systems that you can buy for this system, externals and internals. This one's actually set up with only 3 internals and 2 externals. So this isn't as heavy as it could be. This one weighs about 20 pounds, okay, 20.5, something like that. Okay, but I like the flexibility of it. I like to be able to adjust. I like the adjustability of it. And then, you know, I'm missing a couple other weights back here that I could use, but I like a rifle with a little bit of nose balance, okay? It's tougher to shoot unsupported, but as soon as you start throwing intermediate supports and tripods and stuff, this is very, very stable, okay? Now, there's really 3 things that's gonna help you shoot better. 1 is your scope, 2 is your ammunition, and 3 is your trigger, okay? The trigger, in my opinion, it's one of those things that you can buy and throw into your rifle, and just with a little bit of training time will make you a better shooter overnight. So I used to shoot 2-stage triggers, and I've gone to a 1-stage trigger. And I don't go as light as a lot of guys. Some guys out there are 4-8 ounces. I'm still in there about 12, 13 ounces, just because, you know, I like to be able to place my finger on the trigger before I'm ready to shoot and stage myself that way. With a lighter trigger, I found that I can't touch the trigger without with any kind of reliability on a barricade or even in the prone without the potential of it going off when I didn't want to, which is a negligent discharge. Okay, and when we talk about triggers, I've shot Timoneys and Jewels, Huber triggers. Huber was the 2-stage trigger that I enjoyed the most. I've had the CG Jackson trigger as well. And what I'm using now is Trigger Techs. What I like about the Trigger Tech is that it's enclosed. It's sealed off from the elements. So the reliability of it has been incredible. I think a couple years ago at one of the PRS finales, it was a pretty windy, dusty, and we actually got a little bit of rain, and what we had was a bunch of triggers fail, and the only trigger that didn't fail was the Trigger Tech. So I think there was 71 or 72 Trigger Tech triggers in the field, so it wasn't a small population density, so we actually had a really good number of triggers being tested in those really nasty conditions. Anyway, this particular trigger has been on my rifle for about 4 years. Actually, not this one, but this is the new Diamond. I've got some of the older triggers. They're on my hunting guns right now, and they're set at about 15 ounces. Okay. And then we start talking about shooter support gear, bags, tripods. And what I found is this is probably my favorite bag for the competition world. It's a pint-sized game changer. I also have a full-size game changer. But when I go hunting, I've got a little bit bigger bag than this, but it's filled with Chris Gidding's Get Light, and it saves about 4.5 pounds. So this, if I was going to take it hunting, if I was going to take it sheep hunting, I'd be pretty depressed because this thing kind of weighs a lot. It's like 4 or 5 pounds, and it's extra stuff that I don't really need to take. But anyway, so bags, and then bipod. I really like this bipod that's come out. Sky Thomas is a buddy of mine. And what I like about it is what I can do with it. Okay, so there's a width and height adjustment, so I can make this, I can make it very low. I can make it really high, okay? I can almost shoot this in the kneeling or in the sitting position here. So there's a lot of, you know, when you start talking about hunting and shooting in this kind of terrain, this is almost a mandatory piece of kit just for its versatility. Okay? It is a little bit heavy, but the capability that it brings is pretty significant. Okay? So in a sense, that's kind of what we need. We need to create stability, but first we need to find it, then we need to fix it, come up with a solution for it, and then we have to have the right equipment in order to be able to engage it. Now there's one more thing that, you know, it's endlessly debated about whether or not a bubble level is important. And the debate is whether or not your ears or the fluid in your ears will be able to keep you level, and then you're going to be able to keep the rifle level. Well, your inner ear will tell you if you're left or right, up or down, but it won't allow you to tell whether or not an external object is, okay? Like your proprioception isn't that good. You're not going to be able to tell in this kind of terrain, if you're laying on a side hill, whether or not you're holding the rifle level to gravity. And that's the key. If all of a sudden we're off cant and we've dialed the scope way up, we just started the bullet way left of our target. So our chances of actually hitting, doing all of our math and figuring out what the wind is, and then actually hitting some is compromised because we didn't have a $9 piece of a kit. Right? You can buy this one for $9 on Amazon, and if you have Amazon Prime, it'll get delivered tomorrow. Okay, now this one, I actually prefer this. This is a Benny Cooley put these out by Long Range Arms, and it's an electronic level, and it'll get you within, I think it's 0.4%. What I like about it is that it's electronic, so it works in the cold, and it works at all kinds of angles. You can be almost straight up and down vertically with your rifle, and this is going to still tell you whether or not you're level to gravity. So I bought one of them, and then I ended up buying 3 more. So that's how important I think they are, and what I think of this piece of kit. Okay guys, and that's kind of a wrap for this. It's a little bit long-winded, and I probably covered some stuff more than I should have and other stuff less than I should have. So if you have any questions, feel free to hit us up on the forums and the Hyve. Hit me up. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. And then there's going to be some links for the stuff that I like to use underneath it.